New horror story. The village where children never grow up. I drove into Raven's Hollow, expecting to debunk another rural myth for my anthropology research. The legend was particularly absurd, a village where children never aged past their 10th birthday, remaining forever young while their parents grew old and died around them. Pure folklore, the kind of story that emerges when isolated communities try to explain genetic disorders or high infant mortality rates. The village sat in a valley so deep that cell phone towers couldn't reach it, surrounded by mountains that seemed to lean inward like protective arms. Main Street consisted of weathered buildings that looked frozen in the 1950s. A general store, a post office, a white church with a bell tower that pierced the perpetual mist hanging over the valley. What struck me immediately was the silence. No playground laughter, no children riding bicycles, no school buses rumbling through town. For a place supposedly filled with eternal children, Raven's Hollow seemed remarkably quiet. I introduced myself to Martha Henley, the postmaster, explaining my research into Appalachian folklore. She was a thin woman in her 70s with nervous hands that constantly fidgeted with her mail sorting. Folklore, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. That's a nice way to put it, I suppose. When I asked about the children, her hands went still. You'll meet them soon enough, she said. They're always curious about visitors. That evening at the boarding house, I met my landlord, Robert Quinn, a man who appeared to be in his 60s despite his driver's license showing an age of 42. When I mentioned the discrepancy, he laughed, but the sound held no humor. Time moves different here, he said. You'll understand eventually. The first child I encountered was standing outside my window the next morning. A boy with dark hair and intelligent eyes wearing clothes that looked handmade but well-maintained. He appeared to be about 10 years old, exactly as the legend claimed. When I opened the window to speak to him, he smiled with the kind of patience I'd never seen in a child. You're the folklore man, he said. His voice carried an odd weight, like someone much older speaking through a child's vocal cords. I'm Timothy. I've been waiting to meet you. Throughout the day, more children appeared. Sarah, with her old-fashioned dress and knowing smirk. Michael, who spoke about events from the 1970s as if he'd lived through them. Emma, who discussed literature with the insight of a graduate student. They all looked 10, but their eyes held decades of experience. By the third day, I'd documented 17 children, all appearing the same age, all displaying knowledge and behavioral patterns completely inconsistent with their apparent youth. When I asked about their parents, they exchanged glances before Timothy answered. Most of our parents are gone now, he said simply. They got old. We stayed the same. The truth began emerging when I accessed the church records dating back to 1892. Birth certificates, baptismal records, death certificates, all meticulously maintained by generations of pastors. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The same children appeared in photographs spanning decades. Timothy in a 1987 school photo, unchanged from how he looked today. Sarah in a 1979 Christmas pageant, wearing the same expression of ancient wisdom. Michael standing beside a gravestone in a 1995 cemetery photo, mourning the death of someone listed as his parent. But the most disturbing discovery was in the church basement, where I found medical records hidden behind stacks of old hymnals. Detailed documentation of a procedure performed on every child in the village on their 10th birthday. The records used clinical terminology, but the implications were clear. Surgical intervention to halt the aging process, followed by treatments to maintain cellular stasis. The procedures had been performed for over a century, refined with each generation, perfected to the point where the children never showed signs of physical deterioration. I confronted Timothy in the cemetery where he'd been placing fresh flowers on a grave marked Harold Quinn, 1943-2018, beloved father. The procedure, I said. It worked too well, didn't it? Timothy's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something predatory and utterly without empathy. Oh, yes, he said, his voice taking on the sing-song quality children use when they're excited about a secret. It stopped everything. Our bodies, our growth, our moral development. We're still 10 years old up here. He tapped his temple. 10 years old forever. The implications hit me like cold water. The emotional reasoning of a child, the impulse control of a child, the cruel curiosity of a child, but with 8 decades of experience and no adult supervision. We get bored so easily, Sarah said, appearing beside me with that unnaturally silent movement I'd noticed in all of them. Adults are fun for a while, but they always get scared and stop playing. More children emerged from behind headstones, surrounding me in a loose circle. Their faces held the same expression, not threatening, but eager, like kids who'd found a new toy. The last folklore man lasted 3 weeks, Michael said conversationally. We played hide and seek. He was very good at hiding, but we're better at seeking. Timothy clapped his hands together, the sound sharp in the cemetery air. Should we show him the special place, Sarah? Where we keep the grown-ups who try to leave? Can we keep this one longer? Emma asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. I want to show him my dolls, the ones that used to be people. The medical records hadn't told the whole story. The procedure had preserved their bodies, but it had also trapped their minds in the developmental stage of children. Children who had learned that adults were fragile, temporary things to be played with until they broke. As they began closing in, their movements coordinated with the practiced ease of a pack that had done this many times before, Timothy smiled with genuine childlike joy. Don't worry, Mr. Folklore Man, he said. We'll take very good care of you. We always take good care of our toys. The last thing I wrote in my research notes found weeks later by searchers was, they're not the victims here. We are. But by then, I had learned to play their games, learned the rules that kept me alive a little longer each day, learned to appreciate the terrible innocence of immortal children who had never learned that some games should end. And sometimes late at night, I catch myself hoping the next visitor takes longer to find. Thank you for listening. If you really like the story, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more daily horror stories. Thanks.